Om Ganana Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kavim Kavinam Upavashravastramam Jeshtarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspada Anushrunnoti Visida Sadhanam Om Mahaganadipataye Namaha Om Keshwaya Namaha Om Narayana Namaha Om Namaha Om Govindaya Namaha Om Vishnuve Namaha Matsudaya Namaha Trivikramaya Namaha Vamanaya Namaha Sridharaya Namaha Hrishikeshaya Namaha Padmanabhaya Namaha दामोदराय नमः संकर्षणाय नमः वाय नमः प्रद्युम्नाय नमः अनिरुद्धाय नमः पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः दोक्षाय नमः नारसिंहाय नमः अच्युताय नमः जनार्दनाय नमः उपेन्द्राय नमः हरे नमः श्री कृष्णाय नमः. We come to the 64th chapter of Dashamaskanda of Mahabhagavata Purana. In this episode, we are hearing the story of Nrugaraja. This chapter describes how Sri Krishna released King Nrugaraja from a curse and instructed the royal order on the great danger of taking Brahmana's property. One day, Samba and other young boys of a dynasty went to the forest to play, and after playing for a long time, they became very thirsty and began looking for water. Inside a dry well, they found an amazing creature, a huge lizard resembling a hill. The boys felt sorry for it and tried to pull it out, but after several attempts with heather thongs and ropes, they saw that they would not be able to rescue the creature, and thus they went to Lord Krishna and told him what happened. The Lord accompanied them to the well and, extending his left hand, easily lifted the lizard out. But the touch of the Lord Krishna's hand, the creature transferred at once into a god. Then Lord Krishna asked, "Who are you? And how did you assume such a lovely form?" The divine being replied, "My name was King Raga, son of Ikshvaku, and I was famous for giving charity. Indeed, I gave away countless cows to numerous Brahmanas, but on one occasion, a cow belonging to the first-class Brahmana wandered into my herd. Unaware of this, I gave this cow in charity to a different Brahmana. When the cow's previous owner saw the second Brahmana taking this cow away, the first Brahmana claimed the cow was as his and began arguing with second Brahmana. After quarreling for some time, they approached me, and I implored them to each take 100,000 cows in exchange for that one cow, and to please forgive him for the offense I had unknowingly committed. But neither the Brahmana would accept my proposal, and the matter remained unsettled. Shortly thereafter, I died and was taken by the Yamadutas to the court of Yamaraja. Yama asked me which I preferred to do first, suffer the results of my sins or enjoy the results of pious activities. I decided to suffer from my sinful reactions first, and thus assumed the body of a lizard. After King Raga had told his story, he offered prayers to Lord Krishna and then mounted a celestial airplane which transported him to heaven. Lord Krishna then instructed his personal associates as well as the general mass of people on the dangers of stealing a Brahmana's property. Finally, the Lord returned to his place. Now, the next episode is Lord Balarama visits Vrindavana. He is coming back to Gokula. This chapter relates 65th chapter. Lord Balarama went to Gokula, enjoyed the company of covered girls, and dragged the Yamuna river. One day, Lord Balarama went to Gokula to see his relatives and friends and daddy Nandagopala, Nanda Maharaja, and Yashoda and family. When he arrived there, the elder Gopis, Lord Krishna's parents, Nanda and Yashoda, who had all been in great anxiety for a long time, embraced him and blessed him. Lord Balarama offered appropriate respects and greetings to each of his worshipable elders, according to age, friendship, and family relation. After Gokula's residents and Lord Balarama had inquired about each other's welfare, and Lord rested from his journey. In a short while, the young Gopis came to Lord Balarama and questioned him about Krishna's well-being. They asked, "Does Krishna still remember his parents and friends? And will he be coming back to Gokula to visit them? For Krishna's sake, we have given up everything, even our fathers, mothers, and other relatives, but now he has abandoned us. How could we help but put our faith in Krishna's words after seeing his sweetly smiling face and thus being overwhelmed by the urges of the Kamadeva, Cupid? Still, if Krishna can spend his days in separation from us, why can't we tolerate separation from him? So there is no reason to keep talking about him." In this manner, the gopis remembered Sri Krishna's charming talks, enchanting glances, playful gestures, and loving embraces, and as a result, they began to cry. Lord Balarama consoled them by conveying the attractive messages of Krishna had given him for them. Lord Balarama stayed in Gokula for 2 months, sporting with the gopis in the groves on the Yamuna's shore. The gods who witnessed these pastimes played kettle drums in the heavens and showered down flower petals while the celestial sages recited Balarama's glories. One day, Balarama became intoxicated by drinking some Varuni liquor and began wandering about the forest in the company of the gopis. He called out the Yamuna, "Come near so I and the gopis can enjoy sporting in your waters." But the Yamuna ignored his command. Lord Balarama then started to pull the Yamuna with the end of his plow, splitting her into hundreds of tributaries. Trembling out of fright, the goddess Yamuna appeared, fell down at Lord Balarama's feet, and prayed for forgiveness. The Lord let her go and then entered her waters with his girlfriend to sport for some time. When they rose from the water, the goddess Kanti presented Lord Balarama with beautiful ornaments and garlands. Even today, the Yamuna River flows through the many channels cut by Lord Balarama's plow, the signs of his having subdued her. When Lord Balarama played, his mind became enchanted by the gopis' pastimes. Thus, the many nights he spent in their company seemed to him like a single night. We are going to the next chapter in a minute. We are going to the 66th chapter. In this chapter, we are going to listen to the story of Paundraka. He acted as a false Vasudeva. This chapter relates how Lord Krishna went to Kashi, present day called Benares, and killed Pundraka and Kashi Raja, and how the Lord's Sudarshana disc defeated a demon, incinerated the city of Kashi, and killed Sudakshana, while Lord Balarama was visiting Raja, that is Gokula. King Pundarika of Kharosha, encouraged by fools, announced that he was the real Vasudeva. Thus he challenged the Lord Krishna with the following message: "Since I alone am the true personality of Godhead, you should give up your false claim to this position as well as my divine symbols and take shelter of me. If you do not, then prepare for battle." When Ugrasena and the members of his royal assembly heard Pandrika's foolish boast, they all laughed heartily. Sri Krishna then told Pandrika's messenger to convey a message to his master. "O I will force you to give up the so-called Sudarshana disc and the other divine symbols of mine you have dared to assume. and when you lie down on the battlefield, you will become the shelter of the dogs. Lord Krishna then went to Kashi. Paundraka, seeing the Lord preparing for a battle, quickly came out of the city to confront him with his army. His friend Kashi Raja followed him, leading the rear guard. Just as the fire of universal devastation destroys every living being in all directions, the so-called Lord Krishna annihilated the armies of Pundrika and Kashiraja. Then, after chastising Pundrika, the Lord beheaded both of them, both him and Kashiraja, with his Sudarshana Chakra. Thereafter, he turned to Dwaraka because Pundrika had constantly meditated on the Supreme Lord. Even dressing like him, he gained liberation. When Krishna beheaded Kashiraja, the king's head flew into his city, and when his queen's sons and other relatives saw it, they all began to lament. At that time, son of Kashirajas named Sudakshina, wanting to avenge his father's death, began worshipping the Lord Shiva with the intention of destroying his father's kila. Gratified by Sudakshina's worship, Lord Shiva offered him a choice of benedictions, and Sudakshina asked for a means to kill the one who had slain his father. Lord Shiva advised him to worship the Dakshinagni fire with a black magic ritual. Sudakshina did, with the result that a fearsome demon with a body of flames appeared from the pit of the sacrificed fire. The demon rose up carrying a fiery trident and at once set off for Dwaraka. The residents of Lord Krishna capital Dwaraka became terrified as the demon approached the city, but Lord Krishna assured them of protection and dispatched his Sudarshana Chakra to oppose the magic creation of Lord Shiva. The Sudarshana overpowered the demon, who then returned to Varanasi and burned Sudakshina to ashes, together with his priests. Sudarshana disc, following the demon, entered Varanasi and burned the entire city to the ground. Sudarshana disc, following the demon, entered Varanasi and burned the entire city to the ground. Then the Lord's disc returned to his side in Dwaraka. So this is the story of Krishna Leela of chasing the Paundraka and the Kashiraja. The next chapter, the 67th chapter, the Lord Balarama slays Divida gorilla. This chapter describes how Lord Balarama enjoyed the company of the young girls of Raja on Raivataka mountain and killed the ape Divida Samhara. Narakasura, a demon whom Lord Krishna killed, had a friend named Divida, an ape. Divida wanted to avenge the death of his friend, so he set fire to the homes of the cowards, devastated Lord Krishna's province of Anartha, and flooded coastal lands by churning the ocean's water with his mighty arms. The rascal then roared down the trees in the ashramas of great sages and even passed stool and urine on their sacrificial yajna places. He kidnapped men and women and imprisoned them in the mountain caves, which he sealed off with boulders. After thus disrupting the entire land, polluting many young women and respectable families. Divida came upon Raivataka mountain, where he found Lord Balarama enjoying the company of a attractive woman. Ignoring Lord Balarama, who was apparently intoxicated from drinking Varuni liquor, Divida displayed his anus to the woman right in front of the Lord and further insulted them by making a crude gestures with his eyebrows and passing stool and urine. Divida outrageous behavior angered Lord Balarama and he threw stone at the ape, but Divida managed to dodge it. He then ridiculed Lord Balarama and tugged at the woman's dresses. Seeing this audacity, Lord Balarama decided to kill Divida. Thus, he took up his club and his plow weapon. Powerful Divida then armed himself by pulling up a salad tree from the ground, and with this tree he struck the Lord on the head. Lord Balarama, however, remained unmoved and smashed the tree trunk to pieces. Divida uprooted another tree and at another and another until the forest was denuded. But although he struck Balarama on the head with one tree after another, the Lord simply broke all the trees into pieces. Then the foolish ape started throwing a barrage of stones. Lord Balarama crushed them all to powder, after which Divida charged Balarama and hit him on the chest with his fist, infuriating him. Putting aside his club and plow weapons, Lord Balarama then struck Divida's throat and shoulder, at which point the ape vomited blood and fell down dead. Having killed Divida, Lord Balarama set off to Dwaraka as gods and sages showered flowers from the sky and offered him praises and prayers and obeisances. This is the 67th chapter, Balarama killing Divida, Samhara. In the 68th chapter, the next chapter, we are going to listen to the Kaurava episode. In the next chapter, 68, the marriage of Samba. Jambavati's son, Samba, is getting married in this episode. This chapter describes how the Kauravas captured Samba and how Lord Balarama dragged the city of Hastinapura to secure his relays. Samba, the darling son of Jambavati, kidnapped Duryodhana's daughter Lakshmana from her Swayamvara assembly. In response to the Kauravas' giant forces to arrest him, after Samba held them off single-handedly for some time, 6 warriors of the Kauravas' party deprived him of his chariot, broke his bow to pieces, seized him, tied him up, and brought both him and Lakshmana back to Hastinapura. When King Ugrasena heard of Samba's capture, he called upon Yadavas to retaliate. Angered, they prepared to fight, but Lord Balarama pacified them, hoping to avoid a quarrel between Kuru and Edu dynasties. The Lord set off to Hastinapura together with several Brahmanas and Yadava elders. The party of Yadavas set up camp in a golden outside the city, and Lord Balarama sent Uddahava to ascertain King Dhritarashtra's frame of mind. When Uddahava appeared in the Kauravas' court and announced that Balarama's arrival, the Kauravas worshipped the Uddahava and went to see the Lord, taking auspicious items for him. The Kauravas honored Balarama with rituals and items of respect. But when he conveyed Ugrasena's demand that they release Samba, they became angry. It is very amazing, they said, that the Yadavas are trying to give orders to Kauravas. This is like a shoe trying to climb atop one's head. It is from us alone that the Yadavas have obtained their royal thrones, and yet now they are presuming themselves our equals. No longer will we extend to them royal privileges. Having said this, the Kauravas nobles went inside their city, and Lord Balarama decided that the only way to deal with these who are maddened by the false prestige is through brute punishment. Thus he took his plough weapon and, intending to rid the earth of all the Kurus, began dragging Hastinapura towards the Ganges. Seeing that their city was in imminent danger of falling into the river, the terrified Kauravas quickly brought Samba and Lakshmana before Lord Balarama and began to glorify him. Then they prayed, "O Lord Balarama, please forgive us, who were so ignorant of your true identity." Balarama assured the Kauravas he would not harm them, and Duryodhana presented various wedding gifts to his daughter and new son-in-law. Then Duryodhana, extending his greetings to the Yadavas, requested Balarama to return to Dwaraka with Samba and Lakshmana. Samba got married to the Lakshmana, the daughter of Duryodhana, and they came back to the Dwarakapura. In the next chapter 69, Narada Muni visits Lord Krishna's palaces in Dwaraka. In this chapter relates how Narada Muni was amazed to see the household pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna and how he offered prayers to the Lord. After killing the demon Naraka, Lord Krishna had simultaneously married 16,000 maidens, and sage Narada wanted to observe the Lord's diverse activities in this unequal family situation. Thus he went to Dwaraka. Narada entered one of the 16,000 palaces and saw goddess Rukmini personally rendering menial service to Lord Krishna, despite her being in the company of thousands of maid servants. As soon as Lord Krishna noticed Narada, he got up from his bed, offered obeisances to the sage, and seated him on his own seat. Then Lord bathed Narada's feet, Padapuja for Narada, and sprinkled the water on his own head. Such was the exemplary behavior of Lord Krishna. After conversing with the Lord for a short while, Narada went to another of his palaces, where the sage saw Krishna playing at dice with his queen and Uddhava. So after that, Narada from Rukmini's house, he went to another of his palace, where the sage Narada saw Lord Krishna was playing at a dice with his queen and Uddhava. Going from there to another palace, he found Lord Krishna cuddling his infant children. In another palace, he saw him preparing to take a bath. In another, performing fire sacrifices. In another, feeding Brahmanas. And in another, eating the remnants of left by Brahmanas. In one palace, the Lord was performing noontime rituals. In another, quietly chanting the Gayatri Mantra. In another, sleeping on his bed. In another, consulting with his ministers. And in yet another, playing in the water with his female companions. Somewhere, the Lord was giving charity to Brahmanas. In another place, he was joking and laughing with his consort. In yet another place, he was meditating on the super soul. Somewhere, he was serving his spiritual masters. In another palace, he was arranging for the marriages of his sons and daughters. Somewhere else, he was going out to hunt animals. And elsewhere, he was moving about the disguise to find out what the citizens were thinking. Having seen all this, Narada addressed Lord Krishna, "Only because I have served your lotus feet can I understand these varieties of your Yogamaya potency, and which ordinarily living beings bewildered by illusion, cannot begin to perceive. Thus, I am most fortunate, and I simply desire to travel all over the three worlds, chanting the glories of your pastime, which purify all the worlds. Sri Krishna asked Narada not to become confused by his vision of the Lord's transcendental opulences, and he described to him the purposes of his appearances in this world. He then honored the sage Narada properly according to religious principles, and Narada departed continuously meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the Narada visited Dwaraka, and in the next chapter we are reading the Jarasandha episode. We came to the 70th chapter. In this Lord Krishna's daily activities, you can see the chapter describes Lord Krishna's daily activities and two proposals placed before him, one by a messenger from Dwaraka and another by the sage Narada. In the early hours of the morning, Lord Krishna would rise from the bed and bathe himself in clear water. After executing the dawn rituals and other religious duties, he would offer oblations into the sacred fire, chant the Gayatri mantra, worship and pay tribute to the gods, sages, and forefathers, and offer respects to learned brahmanas. See, Lord Krishna is giving an example of what a household one, grihastha, how the man has to behave. This is what Lord Krishna gives a direction, that he gets up in the morning, he gets a bath, and he sacred fire. He would offer oblations to the sacred fire, chant the Gayatri mantra, worship, and pay tribute to the gods, sage, and forefathers, and offer respect to learned brahmanas. This is the grihastha. Lord Krishna is an example. The Lord's chariot driver, Dwaraka, would bring his chariot, and the Lord would mount it, the chariot, and drive to the royal assembly hall. When he would take his seat in the assembly surrounded by the Yadavas, he would appear like the moon surrounded by the circle of stars called nakshatras. Bards would recite his praises to the accompaniment of drums and cymbals and venas and other instruments. On one occasion, the doorkeepers escorted a messenger into the assembly hall. The messenger offered prostrated On one occasion, the doorkeepers escorted a messenger into the assembly hall. The messenger offered prostrated obeisances to the Lord Krishna, and then standing with the joined palms addressed him. O Lord, Jarasandha has captured 20,000 kings and is holding them prisoner. Please do something for these kings, are all your surrendered devotees. Just at the moment Narada Muni appeared, Lord Sri Krishna and all the members of the assembly stood up and offered obeisances to Narada by bowing their heads. The sage accepted a seat, and then Lord Krishna gently questioned him. Since you travel all over the universe, please inform us what the Pandavas brothers are planning to do. Narada then praised the Supreme Lord Krishna and replied, the King Yudhistira desires to perform Rajasuya sacrifice. For this he requests your sanction and presence. Many gods and illustrious kings will come just to see him. Understanding that Yadavas wanted him to defeat Jarasandha, Lord Krishna asked his wise minister Uddhava to determine which of the two matters at hand, the defeat of Jarasandha or the Rajasuya sacrifice, should be attended to first. So, in this chapter, we will go shloka by shloka. Shukavacha atopasya pravattayam kukutan kujito prapan grihita kantya pratima virdhyo vruta vrahatura. As dawn approached, the wives of Lord Mahadeva, each embraced around the neck of her by her husband, cursed the crowing roosters. The ladies were disturbed that now they would separated from him. The description of Lord Krishna's daily activity starts with the crowing of the rooster. The Lord Krishna's wives knew that Lord would dutifully get up and perform his prescribed morning rituals, and thus they were agitated at their coming separation from him and cursed the roosters. Ladies were disturbed that now they would be separated from him. They are not happy to leave Krishna. That's what it is. The bees buzzing, caused by the fragrant bees from the Parijata garden, rose the birds from sleep. And when the birds began to sing loudly, they woke Lord Krishna like a court poet reciting his glories. Lying in her beloved's arms, Queen Vaidarbhi did not like the most auspicious hour, for it meant she would lose his embrace. Sridhara Swami explains that reaction of Queen Vaidarbhi, that is Rukmini Devi, shows the attitude of all the queens. Lord Madhava would rise during the Brahma Muhurta period and touch water with a clear mind. He would then meditate upon himself, the single self-luminous, unequaled and infallible supreme truth known as Brahman, who by his very nature ever dispels all contamination, and who through his personal energies, which cause the creation and destruction of this universe, manifests his own pure and blissful existence. The most saintly of personalities would then bathe in the sanctified water, dress himself in lower and upper garments, and perform the entire sequence of prescribed rituals, beginning with the worship at dawn. After offering oblations into the sacred fire, Lord Krishna would silently chant the Gayatri mantra. Sridhara Swami points out that since Lord Krishna was in the disciplic succession from Kanva Muni, he offered oblations to the fire before sunrise. Then he chanted the Gayatri mantra. Each day the Lord worshipped the rising sun and propitiated the gods, sages, and forefathers for all his expansions. The self-possessed Lord would then carefully worship his elders and the Brahmanas. To those well-attired Brahmanas, he would offer herds of tame and peaceful cows with the golden-plated horns and pearl necklaces. These cows were also dressed in fine cloth, and the fronts of their hooves were plated with silver. Providers of abundant milk, they had each given birth only once and were accompanied by their calves. Daily, the Lord gave many groups of 13,000 cows to the learned Brahmanas, together with linen, deerskin, and sesame seeds. Sridhara Swami quotes several Vedic scriptures to show that in the context of Vedic ritual, a Badava here refers to 13,084 cows. The words Badvam, Dine indicate that Lord Krishna would give the learned Brahmanas many such groups of cows on a daily basis. Sridhara Swami further gives evidence that the usual practice for great saintly kings in previous ages was to give 107 such Badwa, or groups of 13,084 cows. Thus, total number of cows given in this sacrifice, known as Manchara, is so 14 lakhs. The words Alankriya Bro Viprebhya indicate that in Lord Krishna's kingdom, the Brahmanas were given nice clothes and ornaments and were thus well attired. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada writes with striking and profound insight on these pastimes of Lord Krishna. The reader is strongly urged to study this book, which contains an invaluable wealth of information and commentary on the pastimes described in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Our humble attempt here can never equal the consummate purity and skill of our great master. Still, as a service offered at his lotus feet, we are simply presenting the original Sanskrit text of the 10th canto, word per word, meaning a clear translation and essential commentary, for the most part based on the statements of the great spiritual masters in our line. Lord Krishna would offer obeisances to the cows, brahmanas, and demigods, his elders and spiritual masters, and all living beings, all of whom are expansions of Krishna only. Then he would touch auspicious things. He would decorate his body, the very ornament of human society, with his own special clothes and jewelry, and with divine flower garments and ointments. Sridhara Swami points out that the God's own garments and ornaments include the Lord's well-known yellow garments, the Kaustuba gem, and so on. He could then look at ghee, a mirror, the cows and bulls, the brahmanas and the gods, and see to it that the members of all the social classes living in the palace and throughout the city were satisfied with gifts. After this, he would greet his ministers, gratifying them by fulfilling their desires. After first distributing flower garlands, pan, and sandalwood paste to the brahmanas, he would give these gifts to his friends, ministers, and wives, and finally he would partake of them for them himself. By then, the Lord's driver would have brought his supremely wonderful chariot. Yoked with Sugriva and his other horses, his charioteer would blow down to the Lord and then stand before him. Holding onto his charioteer's hands, Lord Krishna would mount the chariot together with Satyaki and Uddhava, just like the sun rising over the easternmost mountain. The Acharyas point out that the Lord's chariot driver would stand with joined palms, and that the Lord, holding on to his joined hands with his right hand, would mount the chariot. The palace woman would look upon Lord Krishna with shy, loving glances, and thus he would get free from them only with difficulty. He would then set off, his smiling face captivating their minds. Srirana Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur describes this scene as follows. The shy, loving glances of the palace woman, hinting at their agitation, implied, "How can we tolerate this torment of being separated from you?" The idea here is that because the Lord was captured by their affection, he smiled, indicating, "My dear restless ladies, you are so overwhelmed by this little bit of separation. I am coming back later today to enjoy with you." And then, with this smile captivating their minds, Lord Krishna got away only with difficulty, freeing himself with bondage of their loving glances. The Lord, attended by all the Vrishnis, would enter the Sudharma's assembly hall, and which protects those who enter it from the 6 waves of material life, dear King. Srila Prabhupada writes, it may be remembered that Sudharma assembly house was taken away from the heavenly planet and was re-established in the city of Dwaraka. The specific significance of assembly house was that anyone who entered it would be free from the 6 kinds of material pangs, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. These are the whips of material existence, and as long as one remained in their assembly house of Sudharma, he would not affected by these six material whips. In this regard, Sridhara Swami and Vishwanath Chakravarti explain that when Lord Krishna would exit separately from each of his many palaces, each individual home would be visited, would be visible to the persons present on those particular place, visible to the persons present on those particular palace grounds and to the neighboring residents, but not to others. Then at the great gateway path of the Sudharma assembly hall, all the forms of the Lord would merge into a single form, and thus he would enter the hall as one. As the Almighty Supreme Lord would seat himself upon his exalted throne there in the assembly hall, he shone with his unequal effulgence, illuminating all the quarters of the space. Surrounded by Yadus, lions among men, the best of the Yadus appear like the moon amongst the midst of the many, many stars. And there, O king, jesters would entertain the Lord by displaying various comic moods. Expert entertainers would perform for him, and female dancers would dance energetically. Those performers would dance and sing to the sounds of madigas, veenas, murajas, flutes, cymbals, and conchas, while professional poets, chroniclers, and energists would recite the Lord's glories. Some Brahmanas sitting in that assembly hall would fluently chant Vedic mantras, while others recounted stories of past kings of pious work. Once a certain person arrived in the assembly, O king, who had never been seen there before. The doorkeepers announced him to the Lord and then escorted him inside. That person bowed down to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and with joined palms he described to the Lord how many kings were suffering from because Jarasandha had imprisoned about 2,000 kings in his prison. 20,000 kings who had refused to submit absolutely to Jarasandha during his world conquest had been forcibly imprisoned by him in the fortress named Giribraja. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that these kings refused the payment of tribute and other forms of submission to Jarasandha. Also, there is a well-known account in the Mahabharata and other literatures that Jarasandha desired to worship Maha Bhairava by offering him the lives of 100,000 kings in sacrifice. That was his idea. Jarasandha wanted to sacrifice the king's life. The king said, as related through their messenger, O Krishna, O immeasurable soul, destroyer of fear, for those surrendered unto you. Despite your separatist attitude, we have come to you for a shelter out of clear and material existence. People in this world are always engaged in sinful activities and are thus bewildered about their real duty, which is to worship you according to your commandments. This activity would truly bring them good fortune. Let us offer your obeisances unto the all-powerful Lord, who appears as time and suddenly cut down one's stubborn hope for a long life in this world. You are the predominating Lord of the universe, and you have descended into this world with your personal power to protect the saintly and suppress the wicked. We cannot understand, O Lord, how anyone can transgress your law and still continue to enjoy the fruits of his work. The Jarasandha's atrocities he is explaining there. O Lord, with this corpse-like body, always full of fear, we bear the burden of relative happiness of kings, which is just like a dream. Thus, we have rejected the real happiness of the soul, which comes by rendering selfless service to you. Being so very wretched, we simply suffer in this life under the spell of your illusory energy. After expressing their doubts in previous verse, the kings herein admit that actually they are suffering because of their own foolishness, having given up the eternal happiness of the soul in exchange for the temporary conditional happiness of a so-called kingly position. Most people make a similar mistake, desiring wealth, power, prestige, aristocratic family, and so on. In exchange for their own soul, the kings admit that they have fallen under the spell of Lord's illusory energy and have mistaken the tremendous anxiety of political leadership for happiness. Therefore, since your feet relieve the sorrow of those who surrender to them, please release us prisoners from the shackles of karma. Manifest as the king of Magadha, wielding alone the powers of 10,000 maddened elephants. He has locked up in his house, just as a lion captures the sheep. The kings are prey for the Lord to release them from the bondage of karma created by the Lord's material potency. The kings make it clear that Jarasandha is so powerful that there is no hope for them to escape by their own power. O wielder of the disc, your strength is unlimited, and thus 17 times you crushed Jarasandha in the battle, but then absorbed in human affairs. You allowed him to defeat you once. Now he is so filled with pride that he dares to torment us. Your subjects, O unconquerable one, please rectify this situation. So the messenger requested Krishna to help the kings who are under the Jarasandha's capture. This is the message of the kings imprisoned by Jarasandha, who all hanker for your audience. Having surrendered to your feet, please bestow Lord good fortune on these poor souls. Sukadeva Goswami said, when the king's messenger had thus spoken, the sage of the gods Narada suddenly appeared. Bearing a mass of golden matted locks on his head, the supremely effulgent sage entered like the brilliant sun. The Narada, Lord Krishna, is the worshipable master of even planetary rulers like Lord Brahma and Shiva, and as soon as he saw that Narada Muni had arrived, he joyfully stood up along with his ministers and secretaries to receive this great sage and offer his respectable obeisances by bowing his head. The translation is based on Srila Prabhupada's Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Muda indicates the Lord Krishna was delighted to see Narada had arrived. After Narada had accepted the seat offered to him, Lord Krishna honored the sage according to the scriptural injunctions, and gratifying him with his reverence spoke the following truthful and pleasing words. Lord Krishna said, it is certain that today the three worlds have attained freedom from all fear. For that is the influence of such a great personality as you who have traveled at will throughout all the worlds. There is nothing unknown to you within God's creation. Therefore, please tell us what the Pandavas intended to do. Narada said, I have seen many times the insurmountable power of your Maya, who Almighty One, by which you bewilder even the creator of the universe. Brahma, who all encompassing Lord, it does not surprise me that you instigate. Narada was surprised with this ability of Maya. Yourself by your own energies, while moving among the created beings as fire covers its own flight with smoke. Lord Krishna questioned the Narada Muni about the intentions of the Pandavas. The sage replied that Lord is himself all powerful and all knowing, even to the extent that he can bewilder the creator of the universe. Brahma, Narada understood that Lord Krishna desired to kill Jarasandha and was thus beginning to arrange for this pastime by inquiring from Narada about the Pandavas' intentions. Understanding the Lord's own intention, Narada was not astonished when Lord Krishna humbly requested information from the who can properly understood your purpose. With your material energy, you expand and also withdraw this creation, which thus appears to have substantial existence. Obedience to you, whose transcendental position is inconceivable. The living being caught in the cycle of birth and death does not know how he can be delivered from the material body, which brings him so much trouble. But you, the Supreme Lord, descend to the world in various personal forms, and by performing your pastimes, you illuminate the soul's path with the blazing torch of your flame. Therefore, I surrender unto you. Srila Prabhupada writes, Narada said, in the bodily concept of knowledge, everyone is driven by material desires. And thus everyone develops a new material body, one after another, in the cycle of birth and death. Being absorbed in such a concept of existence, one does not know how to get out of the enlargement of the substantial body. Nonetheless, O Supreme Truth, playing the part of a human being, I shall tell you what your devotee Yudhistira Maharaja, the son of your father's sister, intends to do. Desiring unrivaled sovereignty, King Yudhistira intends to worship you with the greatest fire sacrifice, the Rajasuya Yaga. Please bless his endeavor. King Yudhistira is described here as Paramestukama, or desiring Paramestu. The word Paramestu means unrivaled supremacy and also indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead who stands at the very height of all existence. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada translates Narada's message as follows. You have inquired about your cousins, the Pandavas, in the role of their well-wisher, and therefore I shall know about their intentions. Now please hear me. First of all, may I inform you that King Yudhishthira has all material opulences that are possible to achieve in the highest planetary system. King Yudhishthira has all material opulences that are possible to achieve the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka. He has no material opulence for which to aspire, and he wants to perform the Rajasuya Yaga only to get your association and to please you. He wants to worship you in order to achieve your causeless mercy, and I beg to request you to fulfill his desire. Since the Paramestya may also indicate that the position of Lord Brahma, the term Paramestya Kama, is taken here by Srila Prabhupada to indicate not only him, Srila Prabhupada to indicate that only that King Yudhishthira desired Lord Krishna's association and mercy, but also that King Yudhishthira himself possessed the Paramestya, all the opulence of the Lord Brahma. O Lord, exalted by gods and glorious kings eager to see you, will all come to the best of sacrifices. The Acharyas explain that Narada here means to say that since all the great personalities will come, especially to see Lord Krishna, he should also come to that sacrifice. O Lord, even outcasts are purified by hearing and chanting your glories and meditating upon you, the absolute truth. What then to speak those who see and touch you? Sridhara Swami interprets the word Brahma Mayasya to mean Brahma Gana Murte, of the concentrated form of absolute truth. My dear Lord, you are the symbol of everything auspicious. Your transcendental name and fame is spread like a canopy all over the world, including the higher, middle, and lower planetary systems. The transcendental water that washes your lotus feet is known in the higher planetary system as the Mandakini River. In the lower planetary systems, the Bhagavati, and in this earthly and as the Bhagavati, and in this earthly planetary system as the Gangas. This sacred transcendental water flows throughout the entire universe, purifying wherever it goes. The translation is based on Srila Prabhupada's Krishna. Sridhara Swami mentioned that the word dig with an indicates that Lord Krishna's transcendental glories spread throughout the universe like a cooling canopy over the universe direction. In other words, the whole world can find shelter under the cooling shade of the Lord's lotus feet. Thus, the Lord is Bhuvana Mangala, symbol of everything auspicious for this world. Shuka Maharshi says, when his supporters, the Yadavas, objected to this proposal out of eagerness to defeat Jarasandha, Lord Keshava turned to his servant Uddhava and smiling addressed him with the fine words. Krishna is given some personality of Godhead. Krishna says, you are indeed our best eye and closest friend, for you know perfectly the relative value of various kinds of kamsa. Therefore, please tell us what should be done in this situation. We trust your judgment and shall do as you say. Shuka Maharshi said, thus requested by his master, who too omniscient acted as if perplexed, Uddhava took his order and upon his head replied as follows. Thus ends the purports to the humble servants of His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 70th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna's Daily Activities. The next chapter is 71st chapter, the Lord travels to Indraprastha to see Yudhistira. In this chapter, relates how Lord Krishna followed Uddhava's advice and went to Indraprastha, where the Pandavas celebrated his arrival with a great festivity. Yudhistira and Pandavas are very, very happy to learn that Lord Krishna is coming to see them in Indraprastha. Wise Uddhava, knowing the Lord Krishna's inner desire, advised the Lord as follows. By conquering all directions and then performing the Rajasuya sacrifice, King Yudhistira will fulfill all his purposes, defeating Jarasandha, protecting those who have taken shelter of you, and executing the Rajasuya Yaga. Thus, the Yadava's powerful enemy will be destroyed and the imprisoned kings freed, and both deeds will glorify you. So Uddhava says to Krishna, so you can do both together by killing the Jarasandha and releasing those kings becomes more good way for Yudhistira to perform Rajasuya Yaga with your help. King Jarasandha can be killed only by Bhima, and since Jarasandha is very devoted to the Brahmanas, Bhima should disguise himself as Brahmana, go to Jarasandha and beg a fight from him. Then in your presence, Bhima will defeat the demon Jarasandha. Narada Muni, the Yadava elders, and the Lord Krishna praised Uddhava's plan, and Lord Krishna proceeded to mount his chariot and head for Indraprastha. Followed by his devoted queens, soon Lord Krishna arrived in the city. Hearing of the Lord's arrival, King Yudhistira immediately came out of the city to greet him. Yudhistira repeatedly embraced Lord Krishna, losing external consciousness in his ecstasy. Then Bhimasena, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, and others each embraced or bowed down to him as was appropriate. After Lord Krishna had properly greeted everyone, he entered the city as a fanfare of many musical instruments and played reverential hymns were chanted. The women of the city scattered flowers down from the rooftops, remarking the extreme good fortune of the Lord's queens. Lord Sri Krishna entered the royal palace and offered respects to Queen Kunti Devi, who embraced her nephew, and Draupadi and Subhadra offered obeisances to the Lord. Kunti Devi then requested Draupadi to worship Lord Krishna's wives. Kunti Devi then requested Draupadi to worship Lord Krishna's wives. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna gratified King Yudhistira by remaining there for some few months. During this stay, he enjoyed strolling here and there. He would drive on chariots with Arjuna, followed by many warriors and soldiers. So we came to the 71st chapter, where Sri Krishna arrived to Indraprastha. Having thus heard the statements of Devarshi Narada and understanding the opinions of both the assembly and Lord Krishna, the great-minded Uddhava began to speak. Uddhava says, better to go and do both work. O Lord, as the sage advised, you should help your cousin fulfill his plan for performing the Rajasuya sacrifice, Rajasuya Yaga, and you should also protect the kings who are begging for your shelter. So, only one who has conquered all opponents in every direction can perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. O Almighty One, thus in my opinion, conquering Jarasandha will serve both purposes. Sri Uddhava here explains that only one who has conquered all directions is entitled to perform the Rajasuya Yaga. Therefore, Lord Krishna should immediately accept the invitation to participate in the sacrifice, but then he should arrange to kill Jarasandha as a necessary prerequisite. In this way, the king's request for protection would be fulfilled automatically. If the Lord would thus adhere to a single policy, namely the seeing that Rajasuya sacrifice was performed properly, all purposes would be fulfilled. According to Srila Rupa Goswami, in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, one of the Lord Krishna's qualities of Chatura, clever, which means that he can perform various types of work at the same time. Thus, the Lord could certainly have solved the dilemma of how to simultaneously satisfy King Yudhistira's dream and desire to perform Rajasuya sacrifice and the imprisoned king's desire for freedom. But King Krishna wanted to give his dear devotee Uddhava the credit for the solution, and thus he pretended to be perplexed. By this decision, there will be a great gain for us, and you will save the kings. Thus, Govinda, you will be glorified. That's what Uddhava said. The invincible King Jarasandha is as strong as 10,000 elephants. Indeed, other powerful warriors cannot defeat him. Only Bhima is equal to him in strength. Sridhar Swami explains that the Yadavas were extremely eager to kill Jarasandha, and thus he cautioned them. Sri Uddhava spoke this verse. Jarasandha's death would come only at the hand of Bhima. Srila Vashwanatha Chakravarti adds that Uddhava had previously deduced this from the Jyotiranga and other astrological scriptures, and he had learned from his teacher Brihaspati. He will be defeated in the match of a single chariot, not when he is with his 100 military divisions. Now Jarasandha is so devoted to Brahmanical culture that he never refuses to request for Brahmanas. Bhima should go to him disguised as a Brahmana and beg charity. Thus he will obtain single combat with Jarasandha, and in your presence Bhima will no doubt kill Jarasandha. The idea is that Bhima should beg as charity a one-to-one fight with Jarasandha. So even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva act only as your instruments in cosmic creation and annihilation, which are ultimately done by you, the Supreme Lord, in your invisible aspect of time. In their homes, the godly wives of the imprisoned kings sing of your noble deeds, about how you will kill their husbands' enemy and deliver them. The Gopis also sing your glories, how you killed the enemy of the elephant king Gajendra, the enemy of Sita, daughter of Janaka, and the enemies of your own parents as well. So also do the sages who have obtained your shelter glorify you as do we ourselves. O Krishna, the killing of Jarasandha, which is certainly a reaction of his past sins, will bring immense benefit. Indeed, it will make possible the sacrificial ceremony you desire for Lord Yudhistira. O King Devarshi Narada, the Edu elders and Lord Krishna all welcomed the Uddhava's proposal, which was entirely auspicious and infallible. The Almighty Personality of Godhead, the son of Devaki, begged his superiors for permission to leave. Then he ordered his servants, headed by Dwaraka and Jaitra, to prepare for departure. O slayer of enemies, after he had arranged for the departure of his wives, children, and baggage, and taken leave of Lord Sankarsana and King Ugrasena, Lord Krishna mounted his chariot, which had been brought by his driver. It flew flag marked with the emblem of Garuda. As the vibrations resounding from madigas, berries, kettle drums, conch shells, and gomukhas filled with the sky in all directions, Lord Krishna set out on his journey. He was accompanied by the chief officers of his corps of chariots, elephants, infantry, and cavalry, and surrounded on all sides by his fierce personal guard. Lord Achyuta's faithful wives, along with their children, followed the Lord on the golden palanquins carried by powerful men. The queens were adorned with fine clothing, ornaments, fragrant oils, and flower garland, and they were surrounded on all sides by soldiers carrying the swords and shields on their field. According to Sridhara Swami, the word Vaja indicates that some of the Lord Krishna's queens were transported by horse-drawn conveyances. On all sides proceeded finely adorned women, attendants of the royal household, as well as courtesans. They rode on palanquins and camels, bulls and buffalo, donkeys, mules, bullock carts, and elephants. Their conveyances were fully loaded with grass, tents, blankets, clothes, and other items for the trip. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explained that the household attendants mentioned here included washerwomen and other helpers also. Lord's army boasted royal umbrellas, camera fans, and huge flagpoles with waving banners. During the day, the sun's rays reflected brightly from the soldiers' fine weapons, jewelry, helmets, and armor. Thus, Lord Krishna's army, noisy with shouts and clatter, appeared like an ocean stirring with agitated waves and timingila fish. Honored by Sri Krishna, the chief of the Yadus, Narada Muni bowed down to the Lord. All of Narada's senses were satisfied by his meeting with Lord Krishna. Thus, having heard the decision of the Lord and having been worshipped by him, Narada placed him firmly within his heart and departed through the sky. With pleasing words that Lord Narada addressed the messenger sent by the kings, "My dear messenger, I wish all good fortune to you. I shall arrange for the killing of the king Magadha. Do not fear." The statement "I wish all good fortune to you," the Narada said. Narada blessed all the messengers. The statement Ma bestu, do not fear, is the plural being intended for both messenger and the kings. Similarly, the expression of Bhadram Vaha, blessings unto you, is also plural, expressing a similar intent. Thus addressed the messenger departed and accurately relayed the Lord's message to the kings eager for freedom. Then they waited expectantly from their meeting with Lord Krishna. The great Vaishnava scholar Srila Jiva Goswami comments here that by force of circumstances, the kings began focusing their attention on Lord Krishna alone. As he traveled through the provinces of Anartha, Savira, Marudesha, and Manasnena, Lord Hari crossed the rivers and passed mountains, cities, villages, and cow pastures and quarries. After crossing the rivers Drastavati and Saraswati, he passed through Panchala and Matsya and finally came to Indraprastha. King Yudhistira was delighted to hear that Lord, whom human beings rarely see, had now arrived. Accompanied by his priest and dear associates, the king came out to meet Lord Krishna. As songs and musical instruments resounded along with the loud operation of Vedic hymns, the king went forth with a great reverence to meet Lord Rishikesha, just as the senses go forth to meet the consciousness of life. Lord Krishna is here described as Rishikesha, the Lord of the senses, and King Yudhishthira's rushing to the Lord is compared to the senses eagerly joining the consciousness of life. Without the consciousness, the senses are useless. Indeed, the senses function through the consciousness. Similarly, when the individual souls are bereft of Krishna consciousness, love of God, they enter into a useless and illusory struggle called material existence. Pure devotees like King Yudhishthira are never bereft of the Lord's association, for they keep him always within their heart, and yet they feel special ecstasy when they see the Lord after being separation as described. The heart of the king Yudhishthira melted with affection when he saw his dearmost friend Lord Krishna. After such a long separation, and he embraced the Lord again and again. The eternal form of Lord Krishna is the everlasting residence of the goodness, goddess of fortune. As soon as King Yudhishthira embraced him, the king became free of all the contamination of material existence. He immediately felt transcendental bliss and merged in an ocean of happiness. There were tears in his eyes, and his body shook due to the ecstasy. He completely forgot that he was living in this material world. The above translation is taken from Srila Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness. Then Bhima, his eyes brimming with tears, laughed and with joy as he embraced his maternal cousin Krishna. Arjuna and twins Nakula and Sahadeva also joyfully embraced their dearmost friend, the infallible Lord, and they cried profusely. After Arjuna had embraced him once more, and Nakula and Sahadeva offered their obeisances to Lord Krishna, bowed down to the Brahmanas and eldest Lord Krishna bowed down to the Brahmanas and the elders present, thus properly honoring the respectable members of the Kuru dynasty, Srijaya and Kaikeya clans. Sutas, Magadas, Gandharvas, Vandis, jesters, and Brahmanas all glorified the lotus-eyed Lord, some reciting prayers, some dancing and singing, as Madigas, conchals, kettle drums, veeras, pavanas, and gomukas resounded. So Yudhishthira's palace full of musical instruments, making noise and happy occasion of meeting Lord Krishna in Indraprastha palace. Thus surrounded by his well-wishing relatives and prized on all sides, Lord Krishna, the crest jewel of the justly renowned, entered the decorated city. Srila Prabhupada writes, while Lord Krishna was entering the city, all the people were talking among themselves about the glories of the Lord Krishna, praising his transcendental fame, quality, and form. The roads of Indraprastha were sprinkled with water perfumed by a liquid from the elephants' foreheads and colorful flags. Golden gateways and full waterproofs and enchanted the city's splendor. Men and young girls were beautifully arrayed in fine new garments, adorned with flower garlands and ornaments, and anointed with aromatic sandalwood paste. Every home displayed glowing lamps and respectable offerings, and from the holes of the latticed windows drifted incense, further beautifying the city. Banners waved, and the roofs were decorated with golden domes on broad silver bases. Thus Lord Krishna saw the royal city of the king of Kurus. When the young woman of the city heard that Lord Krishna, the reservoir of pleasure for human eyes, had arrived, they hurriedly went onto the royal road to see him. They abandoned their houses. They abandoned their household duties and even left their husbands in bed, and in their eagerness, the knots of their hair and garments came loose. The royal road being quite crowded with elephants, horses, chariots, and foot soldiers, the women climbed up to the top of their houses where they can get a sight of Lord Krishna and his queens. The city ladies scattered flowers upon the Lord, embraced him in their minds, and expressed their heartfelt welcome with broadly smiling glances. Observing Lord Mukunda's wives passing on the road like stars accompanying the moon, the woman exclaimed, "What have these ladies done so that the best of men bestows upon their eyes the joy of his generous smiles and playful sidelong glances?" In various places, citizens of the city came forward holding auspicious offerings to Lord Krishna, and sinless leaders of occupational guilds came forward to worship Lord Krishna. With wide open eyes, the members of the royal household came forward in a fury to lovingly greet Lord Mukunda, and thus the Lord entered the royal palace. When Queen Pritha saw her nephew Krishna, the master of the three worlds, her heart became filled with love. Rising from her couch with her daughter-in-law, she embraced the Lord. When Queen Pritha saw her nephew Krishna, the master of the three worlds, her heart became filled with love. Rising from her couch with her daughter-in-law, she embraced the Lord. Queen Kunti's daughter-in-law is the famous Draupadi. Govinda Grihamaniya Deva Deva Shamaduta Pujayam Navedya Kritaha Pramoda Prate Nrupaha Prutavilokya Brateyam Krishna Tribhuvaneshwaram Ritatotaya Paryanta Kapsute Parishishyate. King Yudhistira respectfully brought Lord Govinda, the supreme god of gods, to his personal quarters. The king has so overcome with joy that he could not remember all the rituals of worship. Lord Krishna bowed down to his aunt and the wives of his elders, O king, and then Draupadi and the Lord's sister bowed down to him. Encouraged by her mother-in-law, Draupadi worshipped all of Lord Krishna's wives, including Rukmini, Satyabhama, Bhadra, Jambavati, Kalindi, Mitravanda, and descendant of Sibi, they chased Nagnajite and other queens of the Lord who were present. Draupadi honored them all with such gift as clothing, flower garlands, and jewelry, etc. King Yudhistira arranged for Krishna's rest and saw to it that all who came along with him, namely his queens, soldiers, ministers, secretaries, were comfortably situated. He arranged that they would experience a new feature of reception every day while staying as guests of the Pandavas. The translation is taken from Srila Prabhupada's Krishna. During desiring to please King Yudhishthira, the Lord resided in Indraprastha for several months. During his stay, he and Arjuna satisfied the Agni Devata by offering him Khandava forest, and they saved Mayadhanava, who then built King Yudhishthira a celestial assembly hall. The Lord also took the opportunity to go to riding his chariot in the company of Arjuna, surrounded by a retinue of soldiers. Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna, it was during this time the Lord Sri Krishna, with the help of Arjuna, for the satisfaction of the fire god Agni, allowed Agni to devour the Khandava forest. During the forest fire, Krishna saved the demon Mayasura, who was hiding in the forest. Upon being saved, Mayasura felt obliged to Pandavas and Lord Krishna, and he constructed a wonderful assembly house within the city of Hastinapura. In this way, Lord Krishna, in order to please King Yudhishthira, remained in the city of Hastinapura for several months. During his stay, he enjoyed strolling here and there. He enjoyed strolling here and there. He used to drive on chariots along with Arjuna, and many warriors and soldiers used to follow them. Thus ends the purports of the 71st chapter, and we are going to start 72nd chapter tomorrow. Thank you very much. नमोस्तु अनंताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादाक्षरवा सहस्रनाम्ने पुरुषाश्रये सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः आकाशात् परितं यथागत सागरं सर्वदेव नमस्कारः श्रीकेशवं प्रियत्यो नमः सर्ववेदेश पुण्यं सर्वतीर्थेषु यत्फलं तत्फलं प्रमाप्ति वासनात् वासुदेवस्य वासन्ते जयत्रयं सर्वभूत निवासोऽसि वासुदेवमूर्ते कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि